If Travis Kelce is going to announce his engagement to Taylor Swift a week before the season starts, does that count as engagement farming? What is going on, everybody? Welcome inside the top 5 of my power rankings countdown in this deep dive series. Today, we talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't know if having the Chiefs, the defending AFC champions, ranked 5th in these power rankings to start this season is going to come as a surprise to you guys or not. You'll just have to let me know in the comments down below. But one thing is for sure, as a part of this dynasty run that the Chiefs are on, they have set the bar as a Super Bowl or bust team really perennially. And looking back on last season, whether Chiefs fans want to hear it or not, I do think this was a very, very good Kansas City Chiefs team that also happened to get very lucky in close games throughout the course of the regular season and even through the playoffs. And then once they met the Eagles in the Super Bowl, I think some of this team's issues were revealed. I don't think this was a true 15-win football team last year. That doesn't mean they weren't a 13-win or a 12-win football team last year. But what I'm getting at here is that I do think this Chiefs team needs to be better than they were last year if Chiefs fans should expect that this team can not just get back to the Super Bowl, but even go to the AFC Championship and continue this run of just unbelievable success that they have had. And that is what today's video is going to be all about. Yes, highlighting the strengths of this team that do make them a very good football team and a legitimate Super Bowl contender, but highlighting some of those question marks on this team that they're going to need to kind of hit some green lights and develop in some areas if you can really expect for this team to keep up the incredible run that they are on. So looking forward to today's deep dive to get into all of that. As we get started, if you could do me a huge favor, please take just a second to hit that like button. It really does help me out. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our remaining 4 deep dives, as well as the start of our regular season content as well, now just around the corner. But let's go ahead and get started in this series. We go through every position group and the coaching staff, and with each of those chapters, we begin that discussion looking at their offseason, asking whether they got better, worse, or stayed the same. And fortunately here for Chiefs fans, as we start with the coaching staff, things are staying neutral here. No significant changes with this Chiefs staff that honestly has about as strong of an argument as anybody as to the question of who has the best coaching staff in the NFL. And as far as the head coach is concerned, with Andy Reid, this year I do have him getting the crown as my first-ranked head coach. And not just that, having Steve Spagnuolo next to him, arguably the best or second best defensive coach in the league as well. It's really a special setup that the Chiefs have here. It's a core part of why they've been able to be such a dynasty to this point and why you can expect success moving forward. And really, what is there even left to say about Andy Reid? I mean, both sides of being a head coach, he is brilliant at. Number one, building the culture here. He's done such a tremendous job. Everything from establishing that championship mentality in this building, the locker room wide belief system that, you know, you owe it to the guy in the locker room next to you to put in all the work because the expectation is a Super Bowl. And if you don't put in that work, you're letting the team down. So the winning mentality of this team, but all the way down to like player development and the way that he is able to identify talent, whether you were a first-round pick, a mid-round pick, an undrafted free agent, a cast-off release from another team, the way that he's able to identify talent, inspire belief in guys that are at lows in their football careers, and then finding ways for them to develop, find roles on this team, contribute to winning football games. That's very, very impressive. So Reid just checks every box from the kind of CEO culture approach of being a head coach, but also, of course, his influence on this offense as the overseer of this offense, as the play caller and the play designer. He's so spectacular, especially in the passing game. If there's anything to be, I guess, critical or that you could poke holes in Andy Reid as a head coach, it's that I don't look at the Chiefs and Andy Reid's offense as this brilliantly coached run game. they're good. I have them, for example, ranked 16th to 18th for run game coaching. But if in this series we're going to really pick apart different strengths and weaknesses of everybody, including the coaches, I think Andy Reid as a pass game designer is as good as it gets, tied for first there. But yeah, their run game, I don't look at this compared to other run games around the league and say, wow, they're doing super creative things, or wow, the results are incredible. The ability for the Chiefs to run the football hasn't really been a staple of this Chiefs dynasty under Andy Reid. Again, they're solid at it, but that is where you could maybe poke some holes in Andy Reid's abilities as a head coach. But overall, yes, I have Reid as the number one ranking head coach. Obviously an asset for this Chiefs team. Now, I do want to spend some more time just breaking down what this Chiefs scheme looks like on the offensive side of the ball. And I think so many people, when they think of the Chiefs offense, you think of Patrick Mahomes in the gun, beating you in the drop back passing game, this run game being a very shotgun oriented kind of inside zone style run game, and just kind of spreading you out and having that sort of pro spread style offense to them, which obviously is also going to include a lot of like quick hitting passes, those bubble screens, those quick checks at the line, where if you don't spread out your defense, they can flip the ball to a guy in the flat and, use that quick screen game as an extension of this team's run game. They absolutely do that and will continue to do that. No doubt that's a core identity of what this offense is, but it is very much the kind of perfect balance of those spread principles paired with pro-style principles as well. And maybe surprising to some, probably not Chiefs fans at this point because they've been doing this for a few years now, but the Chiefs were actually second in the NFL in 12 personnel usage last year with 2 tight end packages. Now, a big part of that is their wide receiving core has struggled, and the best personnel for them has been with Noah Gray out there as their second tight end. But it is a huge nuisance for defenses to stop because the Chiefs will basically force you to pick how you want to defend them. You have to be prepared to deal with a smashing inside run game with guys like Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey bearing down on you with 2 tight ends and deal with that kind of throwback mentality of playing football. But if your choice is to come out in a base defense to try to deal with those packages, well, damn. The next snap, Travis Kelce just stepped out wide as a slot wide receiver. They're in the gun in a 2x2 spread formation. And good luck dealing with that with 4 defensive backs on the field. And if you manage to stop their 12 personnel stuff, then no biggie. They can put Patrick in the gun, let him do his thing, pick you apart, and get to the spread style approach of their offense as well. So it's really that balance of having those proven spread principles paired with proven pro principles. Andy Reid being, he's got to be the most tenured play caller in the league, right? Like there's no one else I could think of with more experience and more of a Rolodex of coverage beaters and knowing what buttons to press at the right time. Again, they will crush you in the drop back passing game as well. So as we know, a very frustrating offense to defend. And then before we move over to the defensive coaching discussion with Steve Spagnuolo, I want to at least give Matt Nagy some credit here. Obviously failed as the head coach in Chicago. It's hard when Mitch Trubisky is your quarterback to succeed as an offensive coach, but he's settled back in here in Kansas City. And obviously anytime you're underneath not just Andy Reid, but Patrick Mahomes as well, it's hard to get a large part of that credit pie. But I do think he's done a good job back here, and his name is starting to climb back up the sort of head coach rankings. Now, there hasn't exactly been a huge run of success of Andy Reid coordinators, especially out of the Patrick Mahomes era, kind of go out and have success elsewhere. And I think that is largely because, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes kind of carrying the load here for this offense. But I do think Matt Nagy's done a nice job, and I would at least be interested if he could get a different opportunity elsewhere, maybe not with Mitch Trubisky. But praising Andy Reid and raving about that is amazing, but the fact that we're not really done raving about this coaching staff speaks volumes to what this team has to work with here. Having Steve Spagnuolo here is the biggest of luxuries, man. We've even talked about this in a handful of other deep dives where I think teams are really trying to replicate this setup where you have your offensive head coach and then you hope to get a defensive coordinator that was at a point in time a head coach and is one of the best defensive minds in the league, but for one reason or another, find that guy that's not going to go out and get a head coaching job elsewhere, whether that's because the league doesn't believe they'll have success as the head coach in this offensive-driven league, or in the case of Steve Spagnuolo, where he's been around, he's in his 60s, and he's completely happy just running this defense, being in many ways like an assistant to the head coach, basically the defensive head coach here. He's got total control of that side of the ball. And the other side of this is like he's developed such a brilliant chemistry with the scouts so that they know exactly what skill sets, what types of players they need to give Steve Spagnuolo to develop and fill out the depth and starters of his defense. So it's a brilliant setup. Like I said, the Chiefs are probably the best coaching staff in the league. The only other team you can make an argument for would probably be the Vikings with Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. I think Flores is probably a slightly more preferable defensive mind to Steve Spagnuolo, while you'd probably rather have Reid than O'Connell as the head coach. So splitting hairs there, but they are at worst the second best staff in the league because of Steve Spagnuolo's existence here. And that's reflected in their defensive coach rankings as well, where they are very, very high. They are tied for first pass defense coaching, first to third, and then run defense coaching inside the top 10 as well, 5th to 9th. So a huge asset here to have Steve Spagnuolo. But I do want to discuss Spagnuolo's scheme as well and what he's doing with this Chiefs defense that has worked so well over the years. I mean, frankly, the Chiefs defense has actually become the core identity of this team over the last 2 years. Obviously, Mahomes and Kelsey and Taylor Swift and Andy Reid are going to get the headlines, but the real football fans know this has been a defensive-oriented team over the last couple of years. So what is Spagnuolo doing that's worked so well schematically speaking? And it's just defensive balance and multiplicity. Now, not multiple in the sense of like their defensive front. They really live in that four-man front. They're not multiple in the sense of like, oh, they'll run 3-4 and 4-3. No, like they're going to live in that four-man front. But basically everything they do from the linebackers back is just very adaptable and multiple. This is a team that's not afraid to get into a base 4-3 defense. They ran the sixth most base in the NFL last year, taking a guy like Leo Chanel and using him as that strong side linebacker, like making sure they have the right bodies and the right amount of bodies at the line of scrimmage to stop the run, where they can then get into third downs where Spagnuolo is at his best. You never really know what they're going to call. And he is so good at game planning against your offense, knowing what you do and taking away what you do so well. But they throw like so many different things at you. They do blitz a lot. They were 5th in blitz rate. And by the way, that was despite being 30th in blitz rate on first and second down. So they do blitz a lot on third down, but it's not overly predictable. It's about 20% of the time they will blitz. But just in terms of mixing up their blitzes, Spagnuolo is awesome. Like, he's going to do a lot of that stuff where he'll put a bunch of guys at the line of scrimmage and blitz DBs, just the idea of you never really know who's coming and which direction they're coming from. So that sometimes you'll show blitz, end up actually rushing 4, but you'll cause blocking miscommunications and mistakes so that you get free rushers. Like, he's awesome at just designing blitzes, but even the types of blitzes he runs are varied. He's been progressive to lean into this, new trend of running cover 4 blitzes. For a long time, it's been, if you're blitzing, it's probably either a cover 1 blitz or a 3-3 fire zone. He'll run those two things, but he was second in the league in running cover 4 zone blitzes as well. Probably loading up some Brian Flores blitz packages and seeing kind of some of the stuff they're doing. So he's continued to evolve, continue to stay unpredictable and successful as a blitzing team, but then just being very balanced beyond the blitzing stuff. And if you go down all of the different coverage options, the Chiefs are just super balanced. Now, they were 30th in cover 3 ran, But that doesn't mean they don't call cover three, right? That's 21% of the time they call cover three. It goes to show you how often the league calls cover three. But by default, if you're not going to lean super heavy into cover three, well, you're still running it one every 4 or 5 plays, but you're also going to be third in quarters coverage, which they were running that about 20% of the time. Cover two, they were 11th. Cover one, they were 16th. Even less man-heavy than they've been in previous years. So they mix up their coverages, and that requires a coach that can, fill out a secondary that can run every different type of coverage and not bust zone assignments and communicate well in the back end. So it's not just pressing the right buttons at the right time and being a schemer, but it's also being a coach of these football players to be able to run such a multiple, diverse system. Not every defense can handle it. In fact, most can't, but when you have a tenured, established defensive coach that so many of these guys have that familiarity with the system and the experience to do all of the different things that Spags is going to ask these guys to do, it's a luxury that the Chiefs have that just not a lot of teams have. And again, a lot of teams are looking to replicate that setup so that they can maybe be more multiple and draw on past years' experience as well in the way that the Chiefs can. So obviously, we can conclude this conversation and summarize it by saying the Chiefs got some good coaches here, man. But that's not going to come as a surprise to anybody here. Now, next up, we are going to get into the roster, break down each position group. Before we do that, I do want to shout out the sponsor for today's deep dive, SeatGeek. Guys, the NFL season is here. It is time to make your plans, figure out which home games you want to, go on a trip, go travel with your team, go to that stadium you've always wanted to go see, wherever it is that you want to go see a football game, or maybe it is the end of baseball season, you want to catch the end of the pennant race. SeatGeek has got you covered. It is the #1 ticketing app in the business for a reason. They have the best user interface. If you understand the color coding system for this deep dive series, then you'll know how to use SeatGeek. Green means good, red means bad. As long as you look for those green dots, you know you are getting the best value for your seat, not just on the SeatGeek app, but market competitive prices as well. I'm always looking at other apps out there to see if I can find the best price. I always find myself back at SeatGeek. And right now, if you use code TFG10 at checkout, you will save up to $20 on your next purchase as well, and you'll support my channel in the process. So that is code TFG10 at checkout on SeatGeek. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's deep dive. And now, let's get into this roster breakdown on Kansas City. We'll start with Patrick Mahomes and the quarterback room here. So as far as the offseason changes go, they are switching backup quarterbacks. Carson Wentz just recently signed with Minnesota, and they bring in Gardner Minshew, who spent last year with the Raiders. Pretty close to a push in terms of backup QBs. I think Gardner is a little bit better, but not enough for me to say upgraded. Gonna say neutral at quarterback. But I guess that means it is time for our yearly segment where we try to find something new to say about Patrick Mahomes that hasn't been said before. He is just on the absolute biggest of Hall of Fame trajectories. He's on a GOAT trajectory. All of that. We don't need to get into the GOAT debate and all that. Like, Mahomes is only halfway through his career at this point, but for him to have the career success he's had, to play at the level he's had, not just like accolades and stuff, but the film on him is just so special. A guy that has the traits he has, the arm talent he has. He's infamous for the play extension, the cross-field throws, getting out of sacks. His pocket presence is just so obnoxious to deal with. No third down is ever dead with him. But it's the fact that he has turned into such a highly methodical passer as well. He is, him and Josh Allen really are the reason the league has shifted so much towards these two-shell, quarter-style coverages, trying to prevent these explosive big plays. And for Mahomes to basically have a mid-career U-turn all the way back to playing a lot like a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning, where he's going to take what the defense gives you. If you're going to play quarters, fine. He'll take 6-yard outs and, throw the ball short of the sticks. let a guy get 2 yards and move the chains all day long if that's what you're going to give him. And that's just so impressive for a guy to understand that even if it's not the exciting way to play quarterback, even if it's not going to win him MVPs, that's going to be how this team can operate offensively if they're going to play you a certain way. So I do still have Patrick Mahomes as the number one quarterback in the NFL with the crown there. Now, that is maybe where the take might lie here with Mahomes in this discussion, is that I do think in previous seasons, I would have said, yeah, you have your elite quarterbacks, but it's kind of like top shelf and second shelf, with Mahomes kind of alone as the tier 1A QB in the league. I do think you look back at the last couple of years, the level of QB that guys like Lamar and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow last year as well, those guys have all been playing at a higher level than Patrick Mahomes, especially in terms of stats and efficiency and production and all of that. I do think that gap is being bridged, but it's much more because those other guys have developed their games and reached Patrick Mahomes' level. Now, I do think a small part of it is Mahomes just hasn't been quite as good. I think mostly in terms of deep accuracy, there's been a little bit to be desired with Mahomes over the last couple of years. Not that he throws a bad deep ball or anything, or that he can't do it. Like, we know the arm talent's there. We saw that big touchdown against Xavier Worthy in garbage time against the Eagles. Like, he can still absolutely drop dimes down the field. But it does feel like there's a few too many times where Mahomes lets it go, and it's just not really where it needs to be in terms of completing those deep passes in a way that, yeah, like the other three elite quarterbacks have been more accurate vertical throwers than Mahomes the last couple of years. That's kind of my biggest ding on Mahomes, and it's obviously not enough for me to say he isn't QB1. And I do think you have to also be honest about kind of what the Chiefs are asking Mahomes to do within this offense, understanding how this team is going to win football games is playing ball control, keeping the defense fresh, and then leaning into Mahomes in those late game, fourth quarter, 4-minute offense situations where it feels like so often, more often than not, Mahomes is going to find that way to keep that critical third down alive and move the chains, get the team in field goal range, and kick the field goal for the win. It's a different brand of quarterbacking than Allen and Lamar and Burrow, where you're seeing these constant 30-point productions and MVP award-winning seasons and that kind of stuff. But a lot of what the Chiefs ask Mahomes to do is just as challenging, if not more challenging, to constantly do the right thing in those tight moments. And yes, I poked fun at the intro of them getting some good luck last year. I do believe that, with blocked field goals, and was the Raiders game just like the fumbled snap right at the end of the game? That has nothing to do with Patrick Mahomes. But for every one of those games, there's maybe two more where, yeah, it's a close game, but because the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes and how good he is in crunch time, there's a reason they win more close games than anybody else, and they lean into it as a football team. So being able to ride that tight wire, it's something that Mahomes does deserve praise for, and why I still have him as QB1. If you put him in a different offense with better playmakers and a better offensive line that asked you to go out and put 30 points on the board, we've seen Mahomes do that in the past as well. It's just not necessarily where the Chiefs are at in this timeline, and maybe that can change with some more vertical speed in this offense and teams getting a little bit sick of the dink and dunk Chiefs offense, maybe starting to play this team a little bit of a different way. So yes, I still have him as QB1, but I will finish this by saying this is the first year in a few years where, all right, if Mahomes kind of stays at the level he's at, I think we have to probably acknowledge that, yeah, Josh Allen, Lamar, maybe even Joe Burrow are actually playing the quarterback position at an even higher level than Patrick Mahomes, and we might see by season's end someone else take that crown from Patrick Mahomes. I'm not quite ready to do that yet, though. But then, as far as the backup QB is concerned, I think Gardner Minshew as a signing is perfectly fine if Mahomes has to come out of the game, or you have to miss a week or whatever. Minshew can run this offense and keep you afloat, but obviously this team's season runs through Patrick Mahomes. They're not going to go on a Super Bowl run with a Gardner Minshew. That goes without saying. But let's talk about the weapons next, and maybe if they're going to be seeing upgrades here and becoming a little bit more explosive. So let's look at their offseason changes, and a lot of movement in this wide receiver room. So 4 receivers on the way out: DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Watson, Mecole Hardman, Sky Moore. Not a lot of big losses there, though, right? Kind of emblematic of where this team was at with this group of weapons last year. And then in terms of additions and upgrades, 2 guys coming back from injury, Rashee Rice and Marquise Brown. There was a lot of excitement for this duo last year, and they were without these guys pretty much out the gate. Marquise Brown came back late, but wasn't really fully implemented into this offense. And then Rashee Rice went down week 4 for the season, and he's going to miss a kind of an inverted amount of time. He was just announced suspended for the first 6 games. So he's only going to be good to go for 2/3 of the season, but he missed 2/3 of the season last year. So I'm still willing to put that in there as an upgrade. So a couple of big additions to what this team had to work with last year. But they also draft Jalen Royals, a very talented 4th-round pick in this draft. And then they also took a flyer on Tyquan Thornton, who has generated an immense amount of hype coming out of camp and made this football team. But the tight end room is going to be staying the same. No change there. But certainly upgrades with this group of weapons that I think is probably the biggest wild card unit for this Chiefs team. As we talked about in the intro, like, they're going to have to get better in some areas if you want to expect this team to go back to the Super Bowl. I look at this unit and being a more explosive offense as their best path to doing that. Right now, I have them ranked as the 19th to 22nd group of weapons. But really, every single starter here, all 3 wide receivers, your tight end, and even the running back position, has at least some form of a question mark where you don't know exactly what they're going to get from that spot. So let's break that all down. That's obviously going to begin with your number 1 wide receiver in Rashee Rice, who is going to be suspended for the first 6 games. So Rice, from a talent perspective, is probably the most proven thing that you know what you're getting, but what you don't know is what you're going to get from his role and that spot in this offense when he's out, with Juju Smith-Schuster and Jalen Royals kind of playing the Rashee Rice role in the meantime. But he has totally emerged as, in many ways, this team's Deebo Samuel. He has been very much a unique case where he looks nothing like he was as a prospect. At SMU, he was very like Cortland Sutton-esque, right? They stuck him as an X-wide receiver, said go win, go balls, back shoulders, tough catches down the sideline. Here in Kansas City, it's been basically everything he is running is working towards the middle of the field for the most part. So slants, digs, crossing routes, screens, sometimes working in, sometimes working out. But the idea of, hey, let him build up some of that speed, catch the ball in stride. And he has just emerged as one of the best run after catch threats in the league at any position. He's sure-handed. He's good at boxing out those guys on those in-breaking routes. And the Chiefs have just done such a special job of like locating that skill set on Rashee Rice that, again, that was not who he was in college, but to kind of have a vision for him and really change the way he is used and can produce, he's just turned into a really nice weapon. He has his limitations. He's not a great route runner. He's not much of an outside threat, at least down the field. Theoretically, though, it's still in there. I hesitate to put the up arrow on Rashee Rice in terms of like, okay, could he develop more of a, release off the line and ability to win balls down the field? It is theoretically in there. You could certainly argue the up arrow should be on Rashee Rice. I don't want to just put the up arrow on every player in this series, but it's at least worth mentioning. But even if he is what he is now, that's a really good, probably number 2 wide receiver in an ideal situation. Because you probably don't want your best wide receiver to be someone that's like not a great separator and overall like route runner, ball winner down the field, that type of stuff. His skill set is much more consistent with that of a really high-end number 2. And right now, he sits down as their best overall receiver, at least wide receiver. But this has a chance to really work with that setup because they have 2 receivers next to him now that bring a completely different skill set in both Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown. And these guys are very, very similar skill sets. That kind of supercharged vertical threat and run after catch threats as well. And this is just something they have not had really since they traded Tyreek Hill. And even last year, it wasn't until like the playoffs hit that Xavier Worthy was a vertical threat. It took a while for Worthy to kind of settle in here and carve out that role as anything more than just kind of a gadget player. But the first round pick from last year's draft absolutely figured it out as the season went on. And now he heads into this upcoming season with a lot of expectations and a lot of hype. And it's kind of hard to push back on it knowing the heights we saw Mahomes reach with a Tyreek Hill on this Chiefs team. Now, I would be surprised if Worthy becomes as good as Tyreek Hill, but could he be Jalen Waddle? Yeah, absolutely. Like, he is genuinely one of, if not the fastest players in the NFL. It's a small debate between like maybe him and Jameson Williams, and I guess maybe Tyreek Hill, depending on how, what he is at 32 years old. But the Chiefs might have that dude. And then he also has like rare acceleration, stop-start ability. He is really effective after the catch, but within his routes as well. Because, just being a speed threat is one thing, but to actually be able to stop on a dime and change directions is a huge part of route running, obviously, as well. So, he broke out in the last kind of 5-6 weeks of this season after an up and down start to his rookie season. And now he is a part of this wild card equation with this group of weapons. Like, where is he going to land in terms of how good is Xavier Worthy? And do some of his frustrations from earlier in the year with drops and a poor ability to win contested catches as a vertical threat, because it's not just getting open, it's going over defenders and tracking the ball, and there's much more to being a vertical threat than just raw speed. Do some of those issues from earlier in the season show back up? Did he just get hot at the end of the season? There's just question marks in terms of just where's the upside going to land on Xavier Worthy, but there's a ton of excitement and for good reason. And then you have Hollywood Brown, where at this point they don't need Hollywood Brown, but why not bring him back on the cheap? This was a really devastating injury last year, frankly, because yes, they ended up drafting Xavier Worthy, and he's kind of their long-term, juiced up vertical threat here. But I felt like before the injury last year, Hollywood Brown was set up to really have a monster season and get a huge contract in free agency. And he probably could have waited till the open market hit and taken more money, as a bounce back candidate with someone else. But he understands but this setup is really, really nice in Kansas City with Mahomes. They know how to use me. They had a plan for me last year. I just want to come back and do that again. Even if Worthy is more developed now and is going to get more of that volume, I still think Hollywood Brown can put up really good tape and just change the landscape of this offense and football games, because now you don't just have one of these guys to worry about with Worthy, you might have two. And honestly, knowing where Hollywood Brown is going to land, that's up in the air as well. I think there's aspects of Hollywood Brown that are better than Xavier Worthy. I think his route running has been further developed, and frankly was further developed as he came out of college. He also has incredible speed, but probably not quite what Xavier Worthy has. There is a world where Hollywood Brown is actually just better than Xavier Worthy here this year. I wouldn't predict that that's going to happen, but again, having two of those dart throws is awesome. And then if both these guys hit, which there's pretty good reason that they both could, this is a really annoying offense to deal with, because these guys can take the top off your coverages very, very quickly. So I'm excited to see this. We've been waiting to see Mahomes kind of push the ball downfield and have more verticality with the weapons for a while now, since they traded Tyreek Hill. We got glimpses of that with Worthy in the playoffs last year, but now we get two of those. And Hollywood Brown was there at the end of the year, but that didn't really count. He wasn't fully himself. They didn't really have a plan for him in the offense, understandably so. I think it's going to look a little bit different out the gate here as this team's wide receiver 3 and honestly wide receiver 2 for the first 6 weeks, because Rashee Rice is going to be out. So that's an opportunity for Hollywood Brown to really make a early season stance of hey, I'm here and I'm ready to play at a high level this year. So that suspension, I think, does help Hollywood Brown. But needless to say, it's an exciting trio that just needs to kind of land the plane, if you will. Now, you have Juju Smith-Schuster and Jalen Royals are worth talking about here because, Juju has done a lot of the Rashee Rice stuff, and last year he did when Rashee Rice got hurt, and Juju can still play in that role. He can, win over the middle of the field, that big, tough slot wide receiver. We kind of know what he is at this point, but he's a floor raiser there. But then this is a big opportunity for Jalen Royals to kind of show what he has to offer. And it's not going to be week one. They're going to give Juju those looks, but I think they'll sprinkle in Jalen Royals. And if he makes the most of his opportunities, things could get interesting in terms of, how it's all going to play out. Rashee Rice is heading into a contract year next year. They obviously like Rashee Rice, but Jalen Royals has a ton of potential to be 95% of what Rashee Rice is in this offense as a really good run after catch threat, a lot of juice over the middle of the field. And Royals is unique too. Like he had a little bit of a vertical threat skill set in there as well. He's much more built like a slot wide receiver, or at least in this role, as he'll play a little outside, he'll play a little inside, but mostly focusing on the intermediate game and run after catch opportunities like Rashee Rice is. But in college, for the most part, Jalen Royals was stuck outside and asked to win down the field, and he was pretty good at that as well. So there's a little bit of that Rashee Rice narrative too, where coming out of college, he's going to be used a little bit differently in the pros than he was in college. Though this time around, I think we know that change is going to happen, where it was a little more surprising with Rashee Rice. But yeah, a lot of talent with Jalen Royals. I was surprised they were able to get him in the 4th round. Would not be surprised if week 2, week 3, it's just clear that he's better than Juju in that role. Now, when Rashee comes off the suspension, Royals is probably going to resume as more of a backup rotational wide receiver, but could be someone that really does break out as like a quality starting player and really could make things interesting in terms of how they want to distribute, this receiving core, who they want to keep and all that stuff. But then you got Nico Remigio is more here as a return man. And then Tyquan Thornton, they bring him in on a complete flyer. They've done this with, John Ross and Mecole Hardman and tried to find other speed threats. They liked what they saw in Tyquan Thornton. He made a lot of plays in camp and in the preseason. And I liked Tyquan coming out. I just felt like the Patriots pairing him with Mac Jones never made any sense because Mac Jones can't throw the deep ball. So, he's not going to have a lot of opportunities to play here, really, as long as Hollywood and Xavier are healthy. But if one of those guys goes down, they clearly have, like, a concept for this offense where it's going to be both speed threats out there stretching the field at the same time. And wouldn't be surprised if Tyquan Thornton could have a bit of a breakout here if he got that opportunity. So it is a very fun, balanced, deep group of wide receivers that just has some questions in terms of where the upside is going to really land with that group. But those questions don't stop as we talk about the tight end room. I mean, Travis Kelce is just so clearly slowing down. At 36 years old, he just cannot move like he used to. So in terms of being a dominant run after catch threat and legitimately separating within his routes, he's still savvy and can get open and all that stuff, but he's just not as explosive as he was. He's much more there as a possession tight end at this point, where if they got to move the chains, him and Patrick Mahomes have that just unbelievable chemistry where Kelce doesn't even really run routes like on paper. It's more of like, hey, we're going to read out Worthy, we're going to read Rashee and all these other guys, but if Patrick doesn't like what he sees, he's going to know that Kelce is reading out the zone coverages with Mahomes, and Mahomes knows exactly where to look, where Kelsey's going to find that soft spot and get open. Or if it's man coverage, they can kind of deal with it, right? Mahomes will scramble a little bit. Kelce will try to win a body position. Mahomes will throw it up. Kelce can come down with that tough catch. Like, he is there to keep drives alive for the most part, not to be at the front of Patrick's progressions and this high-producing receiving threat at this point. That's still a key part of this group of weapons and an impact for this unit, but they're reaching a point with Kelce getting older, showing clear regression, that, yeah, they want to turn the keys over to these more explosive young options, rightfully so. And I think this year we're going to see that. Last year, that got pulled out from under them with Rashee and Hollywood getting hurt, really, and Worthy being so young. I think they're back to that plan where they don't want to have to lean on Kelce all that much. So he is someone that, like, fantasy football wise, I'm not really touching Travis Kelce. I think he's going to have his most productive games probably in the playoffs, and that's not when your fantasy football championships are won. So he's a useful weapon for the football team, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about, career lows for Travis Kelce. He still saw 149 targets last year. I wouldn't be surprised if that comes down under 100 this year. But who knows? Maybe he does defy Father Time and continues to just be an elite weapon here. But Noah Gray is on the up and up. I mean, he has gotten better every single year here. Very just kind of a very poor man's Travis Kelce. I think he's learned a lot in terms of how to sit down in zones. He's got strong hands. He's turned into a pretty good blocker. He's probably never going to be the superstar that Travis Kelce is, right? But he's certainly a balanced player and allows them to run a lot of that 12 personnel that we talked about. So he's going to be out there and play his role, certainly. And then Jared Wiley made this team. They've been kind of channeling through athletic developmental backups because they know Kelce can't play forever. That's what Wiley's here for. He's got some straight line speed and some ball skills. I wasn't a huge fan of him coming out, but you're going to want to keep an eye on whoever the Chiefs think could be that heir apparent and the player that they want to kind of throw that dart on. Jarrett Wiley is that dart throw this year. And then you just kind of have this rotation of receiving backs that we don't need to spend too much time on, but Kareem Hunt will catch a bunch of passes out of the backfield. Isaiah Pacheco will do the same. Pacheco's probably the better pass blocker out of that group. Hunt's probably the more reliable dump down threat. And then you have Brashard Smith, who he's kind of the question mark in terms of upside at that running back spot as well. Super fun, super unique player. He was a receiver at SMU that converted to running back, so he has like real route running ability, real ball tracking ability. Hunt and Pacheco are very limited in terms of juice out of the backfield, route running and that type of stuff. If they want to take the running back and line them up out wide, force the defense to declare their coverages, right? Like if you take Brashard Smith and line him up as an outside wide receiver, pretty much like you either put a corner on him and tell Patrick you're in zone, or take your linebacker, move him way out, out wide, and then Patrick knows it's man. Like it's a legitimate weapon that I think we will see here with Brashard Smith, but he's a problem. Like if you take your linebacker and put him out there, you can't really cover Brashard Smith with a linebacker. So he's just a unique weapon, a lot of juice, a lot of like shiftiness after the catch too. It's not just the route running stuff. Like he showed legitimate human joystick ability, was stunned. He lasted as long in the draft as he did. And like, not to bang on Travion Henderson, but the idea of Travion Henderson going in the second round and Brashard Smith going in the seventh round, when I think both those guys have real ability to make impacts as receiving backs in the NFL, didn't really add up to me. So I think they got a steal there, and we'll see how much they want to use him. And we've seen it too. Like, remember when they had some of those moments with Jerick McKinnon, who just got hurt all the time? Brashard Smith has a chance to be a more durable Jerick McKinnon for this team, which is, I think, a lot more of an impact than it might sound. So it's a very good group of weapons. They have a lot of pieces to work with, but there's a chance that this can be a top 10 group of weapons as opposed to as high as 19th, where I have them ranked right now. And if that happens, things are going to change with the identity of this Chiefs offense and the heights that you might expect them to reach this season. But let's go to our next segment here and talk about the backfield from the perspective of the ground game. And they really aren't making too many changes there in the backfield. They say goodbye to Samaje Perine, and then they brought in Brashard Smith. So at running back, I said hopefully slightly upgraded, but that is more in terms of the receiving ability. I just don't think we're going to see too much Brashard Smith on the ground, because realistically there's 3 guys ahead of him in the pecking order to get carries here out of the backfield. And this is just the kind of definition of an adequate, useful, floor-raising running back room. The idea in the modern NFL that running backs don't matter, that this is a replaceable position group, that you can fill out a group of useful players that can get the job done. The Chiefs have been the definition of that for a couple years now, ironically, since they whiffed on their first round pick of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but finding Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round, bringing Kareem Hunt back, taking a flyer on Elijah Mitchell. They've got backs that can get the job done here, but none of these guys excite me too much. Although Isaiah Pacheco is a really fun style of running back to watch. But yeah, I have the Chiefs ranking 24th to 28th at running back in the league. I think that's pretty standard for how people view this running back room. But yeah, you got Isaiah Pacheco, who has some breakaway speed. He runs with this really fun style to watch where he punishes the ground on which he walks, and he punishes defenders when they try to meet him in the hole. He's been getting banged up, probably because he is such a physical runner. He doesn't shy away from contact, so it's just the nature of this position, especially if you're going to run as physical as he does. And then he has his deficiencies. I don't think he has very good vision. He's not a very patient runner. He can rush into the hole. He can run into the backs of his own guys. He can miss cutback lanes. He has some deficiencies in that sense. That's why he's not a superstar, but he is capable because of those physical tools. And with that, I think he's going to be their primary back as long as he's healthy. But Kareem Hunt will get his carries. I think Kareem's probably going to be more of the third down back, with Pacheco more of the early down back. That's just kind of the sense I get. Because Kareem Hunt still can run some routes, even though we praised Brashard Smith for being the best guy at that. But I think Hunt can pass block. He's a reliable pass catcher out of the backfield, but good on draws and stuff too. The Chiefs aren't afraid to run the ball on 3rd and 7. Hope they get it, but if they don't, they'll go for it on 4th down. So Kareem Hunt running the ball at a shotgun is pretty dang good still. Just not a lot of juice left in the tank, and he's been slowing down, but he gets brought back here, and he's a capable backup. And then Elijah Mitchell's definitely interesting. There's definitely a world where Elijah Mitchell, if he's fully healthy, just kind of breaks out as the lead back here in Kansas City. He looked really good in San Fran. He's got everything you look for in terms of speed, vision, elusiveness, power, but the injuries on him have just been tragic. And the idea of him at this point, getting 20 touches in a game and then being able to play the next week, that feels almost impossible, but it's fine enough as a signing, and he did make this team. So I'm interested to see if he could make an impact in this RB rotation. And then with Brashard Smith, I mentioned I don't think he's going to get a lot of carries this year. He's still new to this position. If he can improve his vision and earn more trust, it could happen in time. He did have a lot of, like I said earlier, shiftiness and instincts as a runner. There's just a ton of potential there, but he needs to be coached up in terms of the mental side of the position with vision and patience and understanding everything on that side of things. But yeah, it's a capable running back room that's not going to hold this team back, but it's not going to really project this run game forward either, in my opinion. But let's go to the last position group with the offense, the offensive line, where they're seeing some big changes here. They trade off Joe Thuney, their all-pro guard and rock in pass protection, to the Bears, really because they couldn't keep him and Trey Smith, and they wanted to stay younger with Trey Smith. But that's a big loss, losing Joe Thuney, no doubt. But they did make some upgrades beyond that. They, at tackle specifically, Josh Simmons at left tackle in the first round of the draft, seems to have won that left tackle job. And then Jalen Moore, also who they gave a 2-year, $30 million contract before they knew Josh Simmons was going to fall to them in the draft. So it's not all bad, but I did have to say slightly downgraded. Losing a player of Joe Thuney's caliber is not going to be an easy thing for this team to replace. But just like that group of weapons, this offensive line is also a key wild card unit for the Chiefs, where if things can go right here, it's going to help them get to the Super Bowl. But there's some downside to this unit as well that could be a legitimate problem. And we've seen the offensive line kind of be this team's Achilles heel, especially in some of these Super Bowl performances. But it leaks into the rest of the season as well. But despite the uncertainty with this offensive line, it's not a bad unit on paper. I have them as the 18th overall offensive line. They come in 14th to 21st for pass blocking and 17th for run blocking. But let's go left to right. So you have Josh Simmons coming in at left tackle. It's probably too early to victory lap my draft takes on Josh Simmons, but I am at this point proud to say that I left him as OT1 in this draft. I said that if you could guarantee that he would bounce back healthy, he would have been a top 5 pick and probably the number 4 overall pick to the New England Patriots. And I also had tweets saying we can't let the Kansas City Chiefs get Josh Simmons, because honestly, I see a lot of David Bakhtiari in his game. Unbelievable pass protection technique, period. But for a rookie, for a college prospect, I'm speechless. Like, I don't have enough to say about how much of a machine he was as the left tackle at Ohio State before he got hurt. From hand placement to varying his hand usage with ghost techniques and snatch traps, to his lower half where he has an outstanding power set. He's got quick feet. He cuts off inside counters. Again, a top 5 prospect in this draft, in my opinion, and I did leave him as my number 1 offensive tackle, but there were the injury concerns, and that's why the Chiefs were able to get him. Well, he has been way healthier than those injury scares would have indicated, and seems to have made a full recovery. Like, when I see the clips of him moving in the way that he has, like, that's the question on him, right? Like, can he recover? Can he be out there to practice? And can he move the way he did on tape at Ohio State? And I'm not going to act like I'm in there grinding every single snap, but this is a case where I think 4 or 5 examples of him moving the way that he did in college is extremely promising. So there is a world where the Chiefs got the steal of the draft, that this is kind of like, remember when the Bucs got Tristan Wirfs in his rookie year, and they got like a Pro Bowl caliber tackle in his rookie season, and that was a huge part of that Tom Brady Bucs team going to the Super Bowl? There could be parallels here with Josh Simmons, who was, in this case, the 5th tackle drafted, whereas Wirfs was, I think, the 4th tackle drafted, but Wirfs was a steal to a certain right in that draft as well. Now, in this series, rookies do come in like having to earn it with lower ratings and stuff. So we got to see Simmons come out, stay healthy, prove that he is the prospect that I think he is. We can't can't finish the victory lap yet, but we're maybe turning the corner. Like, we're maybe turning the final corner, starting to celebrate a little bit. But that's gonna be at least a question mark is just how much can they get from Josh Simmons. Obviously, I'm not that worried about it, though. Where I am worried is left guard with Kingsley Suamataia, who was a hyper raw draft pick with built-in a lab traits, who was forced into action in his rookie season. And yeah, forced into action is the right way to put it. He was unwatchable. They had to get him off the field. He couldn't stay square. He couldn't stick his hands on anybody, just as he couldn't at BYU. So am I to believe that just sliding him into guard, that's all just going to get fixed? I don't know. Like, yeah, he's got the traits. There's no denying it. He's got the draft pedigree. They're going to see what he can give them. But he was awful last year. So we'll see what they can get from him. The sky is the limit with him, but the floor is as low as it gets, frankly. Like, it was bad. Now, Jalen Moore probably could play some guard. So if it's a disaster for Suamataia, that's maybe an option that they have now with Simmons winning that tackle job. They also have Hunter Nauerzad, who I really liked coming out, who wouldn't be surprised if we get to week 15 and he's settled in ahead of a benched Kingsley Suamataia, and Hunter Nauerzad is a quality starter for them. They have some options and some insurance policies, but it's just the absolute wild card there at left guard with Suamataia and ensuing backups, who you also don't know how they would play at guard. But where it's not a question is Creed Humphrey, right? The best center in the game, especially now that Ragnow's retired. I don't know. I just don't have anything to say, man. He's athletic. He can drive you off the ball. He's locked down in pass pro. He can block any scheme. He's unbelievable. He's so good. He's, I think, the best interior offensive lineman in the NFL. So even with some question marks here, him being here is a big part of this still being, the 18th overall offensive line. But they got Trey Smith next to him as well. And, Smith's an awesome player. He's a top 10 guard. He's worth paying. I even understand the process of, staying young at guard and moving on from Tooney and going with Trey Smith. I don't think Trey Smith's a better guard than Joe Tooney. He's much more questionable in pass protection. He just takes his losses there. He's fine. He's not a bad pass protecting guard, but he's much closer to average than he is like what Joe Tooney was, for example. So there's that, but he's also an awesome run blocker. He's got outrageous play strength. He's got the dickhead mentality you look for. Sometimes he can get over his skis and miss on some blocks and stuff, but for the most part, Creed and Trey Smith is in the conversation for the best kind of 1-2 combo blocking, run blocking duo in the league. And they will absolutely get behind these guys in the run game as an asset for them. And then at right tackle, you have Jawaan Taylor, who's very much at this point kind of like a Band-Aid starting option for them. He's pretty solid in pass pro and has never developed in run blocking. He doesn't have great play strength. I don't know. He doesn't really stick on blocks. He doesn't really move guys off the ball. And that shows up in his anchor. It shows up in his grip strength and pass protection as well. He's got pretty good feet. And then there's the whole, he gets his early starts thing and the penalties and all that. Like, that's a whole nother dialogue that I don't really feel like getting into right now. But he's there for this year. I don't know how much longer they're going to stick with Jawaan Taylor. I could certainly see a world where Jalen Moore is their tackle next year because he's getting paid $15 million. I think those guys are pretty close. Jalen Moore, we don't fully know what he is. He's a fascinating signing that they were kind of betting on a few games of tape for him where he stepped in for Trent Williams on the Niners last year. But he was really good when he stepped in, and he was an athletic developmental prospect coming out. So, he's just kind of a fascinating player that could settle in as a starter either at right tackle or left guard or wherever it might be. A smart signing to pair with the Josh Simmons draft pick, because it's like, even if you're not getting him as your left tackle because you hit on Josh Simmons, you could still get something out of him. So we'll see kind of what they get from him, where he lands. We talked about Hunter Nauerzad, and then you have Wanya Morris, developmental depth, and Mike Caliendo is the guard that had to play with Joe Thuney stepping out to tackle last year, and that was really hard to watch. So I don't really like the idea of him having to play, but I don't think they would. Like I said, I think they would go to Moore and Nauerzad first. So there is your offensive line. Obviously a few questions, but you definitely have some good building blocks there at center and right guard in Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith as well. Enough that this isn't really a weakness. It's just, can the left side of the line figure itself out and make this offensive line a real strength and even better than what they had last year, despite losing Joe Thuney there. I think that's very much possible. But that does round out our Chiefs offense here. So they came out as my 6th overall offense as we head into the start of the season, but with some pretty drastic splits there. 2nd in passing game and 23rd in run game. I don't think this is an enforcing ground game, nor does it project with the upside to be this dominant ground game. But still not bad, right? Top 2/3 of the league. But the passing game, I'm excited to see this, man. I'm excited to see where the weapons and the pass blocking kind of land. There's a lot of upside there. And we could see a version of this offense with Mahomes kind of be the most explosive version and, really be that difference-making unit that can propel this Chiefs team back into the Super Bowl picture this season. But let's talk about the other side of the ball. This Chiefs defense, kind of like I said earlier, has become such a core identity of this team. So there's a lot going on this side of the ball, too, that helps this team be a championship contender. But let's start with the defensive line. So they are making some changes here, especially on the interior of the defensive line. They lose Tershawn Wharton, their kind of pass rushing specialist, to Carolina on a pretty big contract. So that's a pretty sizable loss. But they did draft Omar Norman Lott in the 2nd round, very much in Tershawn Wharton's image as that pass rushing specialist. They also brought in Jerry Tillery. I think on paper, the responsible thing to do here is to say that is a slight downgrade, at least for now. But obviously, we'll see if Omar Norman Lott can hit the ground running in his rookie season to replace Wharton, in which case it could be neutral or even better. I don't think Wharton is like this insurmountable loss. But on the edge, not a ton going on. They lose their former first-round pick, Felix Eneduke-Uzama, to a season-ending injury. He, unfortunately, just hasn't been much of a factor. But then they did also draft Ashton Gelati in the 3rd round. So to me, that's honestly kind of a push at this point. So saying neutral at edge. But let's get into this defensive line. And it's a good defensive line. They rank 13th for overall D-line for me, as high as 6th for pass rush. But much lower for run defense, 24th to 27th. And ultimately, it feels like this defensive line's been kind of living in the same world for the last few years, and that is Chris Jones's world, where basically, and with all due respect to these other guys, we'll give them their credit for what they are, but let's be honest, this has been a good defensive line for a few years plus now because of Chris Jones, because Chris Jones is the elite pass rushing defensive tackle in the game today. Definitely the best in that sense. You could argue who's the best overall defensive tackle between him and Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence, a much different player, obviously, being more of a nose tackle type, whereas Chris Jones, a much different body type, plays a lot more 3 technique, asked to, get into the backfield and penetrate much more often as a 3 technique. But that's neither here nor there. The point is here that as long as the Chiefs have Chris Jones, the Chiefs are going to have a good defensive line and almost with him alone be roughly a top 10 pass rush in the league. Not just because of his own ability to get after the quarterback, where he has led the NFL in pressures for interior defensive linemen in the last 3 years, but he has that force multiplying effect as well that is probably even more potent as an interior player than it can be as an edge. He's going to demand double teams, and the fact that he still leads the league in pressures every year, despite getting as many double teams as he does and the attention that he does, is just an insane testament to his capabilities. But you pair the fact that that double teams and offensive line slides are going Chris Jones's way with Steve Spagnuolo's genius as a blitz designer, and that's the real force multiplying effect. That, like, if Spags knows which direction slides are going to go, that's when he's really able to scheme up open rushers and take advantage of, you can't even really call it miscommunications at that point, but take advantage of just offensive line pass protection rules and win with your blitzes through the scheme. And then, of course, because 2 offensive linemen are so consistently allocated to Chris Jones, that's going to open up one-on-one opportunities for George Karlaftis to be the best version of himself, for Tershawn Wharton next to him to get one-on-ones and produce in the way that he did, for Omar Norman-Lott to do the same thing here. So just an immense value for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, obviously, with him being a guy that demands so much attention, as you look at the rest of this setup, you would love it if they were able to find like a true Robin to the Batman that is Chris Jones. They've tried to find it. There's only so much that a Super Bowl contending team can do to add another superstar pass rusher into the mix. George Karlaftis has been the closest thing that they've been able to find to that as a first-round pick a few years ago. And I like George Karlaftis. He's a very good player, and he just got a $22 million contract extension as a good number 2 pass rusher. And, for the most part, that's fine for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a very fun player to watch because he clearly does his research on how to rush the passer and has a different variety of ways that he tries to win. He's got a little bit of everything. He's awesome with his hands. He's got a little bit of power. He's a good run defender. He's a very balanced, quality starter. And I would just say a mid to high ranging number 2 edge rusher. Somewhere in the 40th to 45th best edge rushers in the league is about where Karlaftis would probably land for me. To his credit, his total pressure numbers were quite high looking back on the season, including playoffs where he gets to play more games than most. He did not end up 5th in overall pressures, but he was number 1 in pass rushing snaps by about a full game's worth. If you look at his actual pressure rate and pass rush win rate, he's more in the 40 to 45 range, which adds up to me. He's just a good player. He will win, but he's not going to kill you consistently to maximize the amount of one-on-ones that he is going to see having Chris Jones on this defensive line. But like I said, he's a perfectly reasonable complement to Chris Jones, considering the Chiefs aren't exactly in the best position to find some amazing guy to complement him on this D-line. Where this group does fall off is after George Karlaftis, frankly. It's much more the edge opposite of Karlaftis that you're kind of worried about. Like Mike Dana just is not a starting caliber edge rusher and has had to be for the Chiefs. He is the definition of an edge 3, someone that does a lot of dirty work on rundowns. He's a high intensity pass rusher. I'm sure they love his character and his work behavior in practice and all that stuff. But man, he just doesn't have the traits to feel good about trotting him out there for 50 plus snaps a week as they do. So that's really where you start to say, okay, like, yeah, they have Chris Jones, but you can block these guys if you game plan accordingly. And then it's just kind of a rotation of other options besides Mike Dana. The other pass rusher that scares you at least a little bit is Charles Omenihu if he can stay healthy. And they were really excited when they got him from the Niners on a 2-year, $20 million contract because, like I said, they've been looking for more of a difference maker to add to this group. And Omenihu was a potential value signing in that sense because he was really a game changer in that year and a half he had with the Niners. But the Chiefs just haven't been able to get that out of him. He's missed so much time on that 2-year deal. He's still been a pretty good like pocket pusher and an athlete on that D-line that can play a little edge. Definitely a better pass rusher than Mike Dana on third downs, but he can also step inside and rush the passer as a 4-eye, as a 3 technique from like a wide 9 look. So, you know, he's definitely going to be in kind of a rotational pass rush specialist type of role. And if he's healthy between him and Mike Dana, you could maybe get a little bit more than what they got on that edge 2 spot from last year where it was really mostly Mike Dana. He had to play 932 snaps last year, which is just an absurd amount of snaps considering the player that he is. But it's just hard to expect that from Charles Omenihu. It's kind of whatever you get from him is house money type of deal. They bring him back on a cheap year 1-year deal post that 2-year contract that didn't really work out for the Chiefs here. And then they did draft Ashton Gelati in the 3rd round. We'll see what they can get from him. Very strong, heavy-handed edge rush prospect out of Louisville. Worst case, he's another Mike Dana for this team. Best case, you're getting someone that can be something close to what Charles Omenihu has been throughout his career. But, I don't think he's like super twitched up or ever going to be a superstar. But there's going to be added opportunities for him with Felix Senaduke-Uzama going down for the year for sure. But again, not a guy you're really counting on. And then Malik Herring's probably going to make this team now with FAU done for the year. So, yeah, it's just not the most exciting group of edge rushers after George Karlaftis. And even him, it's like, is he really good enough to be your team's best edge rusher? It's borderline. Certainly when you have a Chris Jones, you can still have a good defensive line with that setup. But then there are also your interior defensive players next to Chris Jones, and they're obviously going to need somebody to step up with Tershawn Wharton leaving. Wharton was 3rd on this team in pressures with 42 pressures last season. So they are looking at Omar Norman Lott really as a mirror image of the guy. And it kind of makes sense. Undersized, super athletic, 3 technique style pass rusher. Norman Lott's a true wild card as a prospect and for this Chiefs team as well, considering they're going to be counting on him to get after the quarterback and fill into those shoes of Wharton. But definitely a wild card as a prospect because he hardly played at Tennessee. They had this frankly frustrating to watch as a NFL scout, frustrating to watch how often they rotated those defensive linemen on Tennessee. He literally played 225 snaps in his final season there. That's crazy. That's 18 snaps a game, but extremely efficient when he was out there. He basically got to just come out for pass rushing downs. And on 139 pass rushing snaps, he had 27 pressures. That's an absurd pressure rate for an interior player. So he's got kind of a little bit of everything. He's got power. He's got a ton of first step quickness to win with finesse, room to develop as well as a guy that's hardly played. But for a 5th-year player that's basically only played a season's worth of snaps in his college career, he's just a wild card, right? The film was really good as a pass rusher. You're just hoping that can translate into getting more snaps against true NFL competition. Granted, he did it in the SEC. Now, from a run defense perspective, like he's a total work in progress. He's played 160 snaps against the run in the last 2 years. He's played 400 snaps against the run in his college career, and he's kind of an undersized guy. So getting anything from that sense in his first year would be honestly a bit of a surprise, but that is why they have that rotation of veterans. Mike Pennell, who's been kind of an ageless godsend for this team, stepped in late in that Super Bowl run in 2023. I want to say they picked him up like late season because they were struggling to stop the run, and he was a huge impact there. He was a big contributor towards this run defense not sucking last year. It was actually pretty good. They had a big turnaround with run defense. I think Mike Pennell doing a lot of that dirty work is a big deal for this team. He's no spring chicken, right? He's 34 years old, so you hope you don't get age regression and a fall off there, which is certainly possible. But they're definitely going to be counting on him again to play a good bit of early down work, if not even more this year. And then they do bring Derek Nadi back, who didn't end up making the Jets team, which isn't horribly surprising. He's just a big athlete out there. He moves well for a nose tackle, but he just hasn't really figured out the position in his time in the NFL. So, those guys are more early down presences, and then they'll bring in Norman Lott, who you're hoping will be an impact in his rookie year. And then they did bring in Jerry Tillery as well. He's a good backup to both Norman Lott and Chris Jones, just for what he is as a backup. Like, he can collect some pass rush wins, but similarly, just not a very good run defender, and definitely not some elite pass rusher either. But yeah, there's your Chiefs D-line. It's very similar to what we said about this team for a few years now. It is Chris Jones. George Karlaftis has come around as a nice complementary player, and then they're going to try to figure it out with the rest of these guys. So that kind of makes sense how you end up with a top 10 pass rush, about the 13th overall defensive line. Some question marks, but still in a spot where they should be pretty good with this D-line. But let's go to the next level of the defense with the linebackers. Not a lot of change this offseason here. No losses, and they draft Jeffrey Bossa out of Oregon in the 5th round. But Bossa, not enough for me to say upgraded at linebacker. I have it as neutral from this offseason. But yeah, same group here. And I don't want to say this is the best unit on the Chiefs, but it is like the most uniquely talented in the sense that you will be hard-pressed to find a better linebacker trio in the NFL. I feel pretty confident saying, just kind of off the top of my head, that this is the best LB trio in the league. Like maybe Detroit would have an argument for that, but the Chiefs' ability to actually come out in a 4-3 base defense, which they actually do about a quarter of the time, goes a very long way towards their ability to stop the run. Like we just looked at, like their D-line is okay in terms of run defense, but it's really what these linebackers are able to do that does a lot of the heavy lifting towards this being a top 10 ranking run defense last year as it was. They ranked 9th in run defense DVOA in 2024. So this is definitely a very good group of linebackers and a big asset for the Chiefs. In terms of the rankings, they rank 6th to 7th for overall linebacker. They rank as high as second to 4th for linebacker run defense, and then middle of the pack for linebacker coverage, right there in a cluster of mid, if you will, 12th to 18th. Much better as a run defending unit here with these linebackers. But yeah, we got really 3 core players, 2.5 starters really to talk about here. So Nick Bolton, who they brought back in free agency, I was a little bit surprised that they paid him considering what Leo Chanel has shown here. I thought it was a pretty easy decision to just give Leo Chanel more work here, but they obviously love the ability to come out in a base 4-3 and what this trio can do, so I understand it. But yeah, Bolton, I almost want to say he's regressing. Like, he just hasn't been the same guy the last couple of years, frankly, as he was earlier in his career, where he was looking more like a top 6-7 linebacker in the league. His missed tackle rate has doubled since what it was earlier in his career. For example, the first 2 years of his career were 5.6% missed tackle rate as a rookie, 7.1% the next year. And then you go to 2023, it goes up to 10.5%. Last year, 15%. So he's been missing a lot more tackles. Now, he's still a very good run defender, and if he can clean up those missed tackles that have shown up as frankly an issue for him over the last year and a half, then he could get back to being more of a top 6, 7, 8 linebacker in the league, because He plays like a bat out of hell. He gets off blocks. He's very instinctive overall. I think he reads out the run very well as a captain of this defense. He sees things well in coverage. He's definitely a better coverage linebacker than he has any right to be as just kind of like an average athlete at 5'11". Like, he can't cover a ton of ground quickly like some of the game's freaks can. But he does make, maybe 4 or 5 really impressive coverage plays where he's just a step ahead of the QB at times. So I love what he brings to the table from a mental side and a leadership side. And you'd certainly rather have him back here for 2024 than not. My only question on giving him the money here is, does that mean Leo Chenal's not going to get the money? And we're going to talk about Chenal in just a second here. But if they lose Chenal because they paid Nick Bolton, I think that could be a potentially wrong choice. But they also might be able to work it out where they keep both these guys. So it's something to keep an eye on at least. But yes, for now, he is their LB1 and puts them in a good spot at the top of the pecking order here. And then you have Drew Tranquill, who as an LB2 has been just everything they possibly could have asked him to be since they signed him. He's not a particularly expensive player, but he's a very balanced guy to be next to Nick Bolton there. Not the biggest guy, not the most athletic guy, most consistent overall tackler, but just sees things well, has enough size to get off blocks, plays with intensity. And as an LB2 making about $6.5 million a year, they've gotten a lot of value out of Drew Tranquill. And the reason he plays over Leo Chenal is, as much as I love Leo Chenal and we're about to rave about him, Tranquill is just the much more complete player in terms of coverage and zone IQ and movement out in space. So that's why those two are your core 3-down players. But then Leo Chenal is definitely a factor for this team, even if he's not one of their 2 core starters at linebacker. Hell, you could even argue he's the biggest difference maker out of this linebacker group because his run defense is absurd. I mean, the play strength that he has, the intensity that he plays the run with, as a guy that has like all the size at about 250 pounds to just take on offensive linemen, get off blocks. They'll put him up as kind of an on-ball linebacker, effectively an edge rusher, and hold the point of attack. Like, he is probably the biggest asset that the Chiefs have for their run defense overall. And just such a steal for the Chiefs as well. To get him in the 3rd round just blew my mind. He was a 1st to a 2nd round prospect for me. Could not believe, for example, the Green Bay Packers took like Quay Walker over him when Leo Chenal was right in their backyard. Packers basically gifted this team Creed Humphrey and Leo Chenal. You're welcome, Chiefs fans. But it wasn't just them. Like, the Miami Dolphins took Channing Tindall, who hardly played at Georgia, before Chenal too. So just a pair of overrated Georgia linebackers getting drafted ahead of Chenal. But yeah, what a benefit for the Chiefs to just have him as an LB3 over these years. And I don't think his role is going to change that much this year. They have a setup that's worked for them. If he can really impress this team with his coverage capabilities, they might start to sprinkle in more 3rd down Leo Chenal over Drew Tranquill, just to kind of feel that out. Like, do they want to give Leo Chenal a super contract? But man, I really think we are heading towards Chenal being one of the, linebackers don't get paid that much money, but him hitting the market and getting a top, pretty much top of the market linebacker deal. I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting $18-19 million in this upcoming free agency, because he's arguably a top 3 run defending linebacker in the league already. And he's never even been a full-time starter. So needless to say, big fan of Chenal, and I think this is just the beginning of an electric career for him. Someone that my pro comp on coming out was Demario Davis. I see a lot of similarities with the way he plays and his size and his athleticism. But the backups here are backups. Jeffrey Bassa, just kind of your vintage draft and stash athlete at linebacker that's not ready to play the position. Really was not a fan of his tape at Oregon, but I'm not a fan of most linebackers' tape coming out of college. It's more about drafting a guy in Bassa who spent the first year of his career at Oregon as a safety and kind of gradually learn the position. It's such a tough position to learn. So, if they can develop him into a quality backup while he competes on special teams, it's not the worst use of a 5th round pick. It's just I would be pretty surprised if he fully broke through as a starter, but it's certainly not out of the range of possibilities. And then you got Jack Cochran, who's been around here as mostly a special teamer for the last couple of years. But obviously, like, if one of their starters goes down, they would probably abort a lot of the 4-3 stuff and just, slide in Chanel or whatever, because they're 3 deep of starters. So they're in a pretty good spot roster-wise with these first 2 position units on defense, top 13 for D-line, top 7 at linebacker. Let's see if they can round it out with their secondary here. First things first, let's talk about their offseason changes at cornerback and at safety. Definitely some change-ups. So upgraded at cornerback, really no losses there, but they bring in Christian Fulton, interdivision from the Chargers, who had a nice bounce-back year last year. And then they spend a 3rd-round pick on Noel Williams as well out of Cal. So upgraded at corner, but downgraded at safety, where they don't have any notable additions. They're going to be counting on some of the guys they've drafted over the last few years. But they are losing Justin Reid, who continued to play well for this team and got a nice big contract by the New Orleans Saints. So upgraded at corner, but downgraded at safety. But as we look at this Chiefs secondary, they do round out the kind of balance that this defense has. They come in inside the top half of the league for secondary for me. They rank 11th to 15th for DB coverage. And this all starts with Trent McDuffie. He's doing a fair share of heavy lifting here, but he is a true superstar, do-it-all corner. He plays inside, he plays outside. He's in the top 5 to 6 of corners in the NFL today, in my opinion. And that's not to take anything away from Trent McDuffie. It's just there's other corners that are playing at an even higher level around the league right now, but it is just like very hard to pick holes in Trent McDuffie's game. Has some of the best combination of physical agility and quickness and mental reactive time, where he's just always in guys' hip pockets. Again, the fact that he can go inside and out, play in the slot, play physical run defense from the slot, but also step outside and play bump and run coverage on the outside. He can play off zone. He can literally do everything. And it's to the point, too, where McDuffie's become kind of a common pro comp for the sort of undersized, good at everything, not great at everything cornerback. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. Trent McDuffie's kind of just great at everything. And he is on a fast track for a monster contract. In fact, he really could have been one of these players heading into the last year of his first round rookie contract. He's got the 5th-year option in next year's season, but we're seeing a lot of superstar players want that contract extension at this timeline that Trent McDuffie's on. He very well could have made a stink about it and said, I want my money now. Being a team player, not asking for that, but he is at the level that guys maybe like Garrett Wilson, Derek Stingley from that same draft class got his money. Obviously, I think Stingley's a little bit better, but I think McDuffie's very much in that caliber. So I don't know. Maybe the Chiefs get something done before the season starts here, but I would imagine that as they look out at their salary cap structure and who they want to pay, who they want to keep, all that stuff, they were willing to let L'Jarius Sneed go. I don't think Trent McDuffie is going anywhere here. That would be a pretty damn big surprise, but it's not going to be cheap to keep him around, that's for sure. But they have a lot of depth at cornerback next to him, just not really a lot of star players. Christian Fulton had a very good year last year, bouncing back from a couple of really down years in Tennessee to the point that he was pretty much available for nothing for the Chargers to pick him up. And I like Fulton. I always have. I think he's a very balanced player in his own right. He can play man. He's gotten much better in zone over the years. And a big step forward he made last year underneath Harbaugh and the Chargers was as a run defender and in his tackling consistency. I mean, in that final year in Tennessee where they basically had enough, he missed 20% of his tackles. He about cut that in half, down to 11% last year. Now, the Chargers did play that like super cover 3 off-zone system. They basically just had all of their corners play as an extension of their safety staff, keep things in front of you and tackle well, and he did that. He's going to be asked to do a lot more here with the Chiefs. There were times where if the Chargers wanted to run man coverage, which was very, very rarely, I want to say they were 32nd in man coverage rate last year. But if they did want a corner to actually take on a number 1 wide receiver, Fulton was the guy they would ask to do that. And he held up valiantly in that in that assignment. So again, I think they're getting a very solid, balanced number 2 corner. They paid pretty good money to get that player, and expectations are he should be a pretty stable signing for them. Even if he is a guy that, like, not the most crazy athlete, he will take his losses. But again, as a number 2, he fills in perfectly fine. And then by solidifying that CB2 spot, the hole that was left by the departure of L'Jarius Sneed last year, now you're able to take Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams and have them fill in probably in their more natural roles as kind of a CB3 spot. These two guys have been seemingly inseparable since they drafted them, both in that same draft class, both basically drafted off of the same kind of measurables and, archetype as day 3 picks, and the Chiefs were just hoping that they would hit on one of those guys, and they kind of hit on both those guys. They like Jalen Watson a little bit more. He's been a little bit more consistent when he's been on the field. And then by really securing that CB2 spot in free agency, now it's Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams again here in their 4th year of that rookie contract, the last year. These two guys have been really back and forth since they were both drafted in 2022. Both day 3 draft picks, kind of the double dip draft strategy for the Chiefs, where they just took a couple of lengthy traits-based prospects kind of in the same archetype. And honestly, they've both really been hits for what they are, right? A 4th round pick on Joshua Williams, a 7th round pick on Jalen Watson. These guys haven't been perfect. Neither have really fully secured a starting opportunity here with the Chiefs. So in their 3 seasons, Jalen Watson has played 1,790 snaps, and Joshua Williams has played 1,356 snaps. So they prefer Watson slightly, but Williams not too far behind him, and it's good depth. If anybody goes down, especially on the outside, they can fill in with, presumably Joshua Williams here. And you've got a pair of guys that, while they might not be perfect or the most elite athletes or anything, 2 guys that are very familiar with this system. You think back to what we said about Steve Spagnuolo and, put a lot on these guys' plates. That familiarity should prove useful. And maybe one of these guys, more likely Watson than Williams, but could be either of these guys, honestly. Maybe one of these guys does impress enough, goes through a full season as the starter in a way that neither of these two have, and can earn more of a long-term contract extension as more of a bona fide starter for this team. But I will say that if it were Trent McDuffie that got hurt, it would probably be Shamari Connor stepping in as the nickel corner as opposed to Joshua Williams stepping in, because I don't love Fulton or Watson in the nickel. Shamari Connor very much would be that guy. And I think it's appropriate to talk about him next, even before we talk about these other safeties. Even if he's not a listed starter, they will run a lot of dime and use Shamari Connor a bunch. I'm almost regretting, for those looking at the graphic, not giving him his own player card there. But he very much will play probably 40, 50% of the snaps. Last year he played even more than that, but they had a little bit more moving pieces in the secondary. Looking at it, they played 22% of their defense last year was a dime defense. That was the 4th most in the league. So having Shamari Connor as that dime back, certainly he'll get his playing time. And then presumably it's pretty unlikely that all these guys stay healthy. So if either of your safeties go down, or if Trent McDuffie gets banged up, or you just want to give a guy a breather for a drive, like, Connor's going to get some rotational snaps as well, I would think. But he's just kind of that middle slot, intermediate defensive back, kind of the positionless defensive back. But he's a headhunter, a lot of speed, fun player. Maybe could even be a guy that, like, the arrow's pointing up on him and stuff. But it is kind of tough when you're a positionless player to, like, really develop and establish consistency to earn more of a full-time role. But if anyone can do it, I think Connor could emerge as more of a starter, whether that's as just their starting nickel corner or eventually overtaking one of these 2 safeties. Though, again, like, being a traditional deep safety isn't really Shamari Connor's skill set and his game. But I'm not a huge fan of Brian Cook, especially as we slide more towards the starting safeties here. I just don't see him as really an impact player on the back end. He's a good cleanup artist. He's a good run defender, and I'm sure they like his general approach to the game, and they feel safe with him that he's not going to necessarily bust coverages or anything like that. But he just doesn't have the athletic twitch out in space on the back end to get involved in coverage very often. Yes, he had 2 interceptions last year, but they're like total generic, like vintage safety picks. One is Jameis Winston just throwing a YOLO ball right to him. And one is the QB getting hit while he's thrown, and the ball ending up in Brian Cook's territory. Beyond that, he had no passes defended on the season. And that checks, like, based on what he was as a prospect coming out. I don't know. It's just not the ideal player to be a starting safety for me, in my opinion. And honestly, he kind of holds this secondary back a little bit, especially because next to him, Jaden Hicks hasn't really broken through yet. I like Jaden Hicks. I think he has a lot more potential to show range and playmaking skills in coverage on the back end. And he got to show those off in about a half seasons of snaps, kind of getting involved in those dime defenses as the season went on. And he played well enough that they certainly felt prepared to let Justin Reid go. So he's kind of where the upside lies in this secondary for them to kind of exceed this ranking that we have on them of 11th to 15th in the league. If Jaden Hicks can break through as just a quality, like, impact starter safety on the back end, who's also a really full-size safety that can get involved in run defense as well. If he can take a big leap, that would go a long way towards me feeling good about this safety room that right now just is full of question marks. Now, there is some more depth that we haven't discussed yet. Not really at safety. That's pretty much it. It's Cook, Hicks, and Shamari Connor. Wouldn't be stunned if they're in the process of trying to add one more safety to this room here before the season starts. But there is definitely some cornerback depth of note here. Noel Williams, a 3rd-round pick out of Cal. They can see the writing on the wall, right? Both Josh Williams and Jalen Watson are upcoming free agents. Christian Fulton's not going to be here forever, and they got to pay Trent McDuffie, so they want to keep the pipeline coming, and he's a good prospect to do that. Again, a very balanced, lengthy corner coming out of Cal. Not necessarily the fastest guy, but if there was a Chiefs corner sitting there in the 3rd, 4th round in this draft, it was probably Noel Williams. So he's not going to play a ton this year, unless things are going wrong, but definitely a chance for him to have, at least like a Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams type career arc, if not even more. So I like that. Pretty solid draft pick there in the middle of the draft. Then they have Christian Roland Wallace as well, was an undrafted pickup last year who ended up playing a decent amount down the stretch last year and really showed his flashes like tackling and in run defense. And he ends up making the 53-man roster here in a pretty crowded cornerback room. And then they do still have Najee Johnson on IR. I don't know if he's done for the season or not, frankly. But he was a guy that struggled last year while Watson and Williams weren't constantly available. They had to go to Najee Johnson, and I think Chiefs fans, not to be rude here to Najee, but are probably pretty happy to see him not on the active 53-man roster right now, as opposed to some of these other guys we've talked about. But he might end up making a comeback if they really like him for some reason. But that does round out this defense that, as we've seen, is just extremely balanced down the board. And that's going to be reflected in their final defensive rankings as well. They come out as my 4th-ranked pass defense, my 8th-ranked run defense, which is good to get them as the 4th overall defense as well. It is just a well spread out roster with depth and good contributors at all 3 levels of the defense, overseen by top 2 defensive coaching in the league. It's a very nice setup that the Chiefs have here. Now, that said, I don't know that this is the side of the ball where there's a ton of upside for them to get a whole lot better. Hicks at safety and Omar Norman Lott, there's some pockets of upside, but this is probably roughly who the Chiefs defense is going to be, somewhere inside the top 10 as a defense, but maybe not like this overwhelming force that you can't beat, kind of like the Eagles defense turned into last year, or, some of these true high-end championship caliber defenses, your Legion of Booms and your Denver Broncos that carried Peyton Manning. No, they're hoping to set the floor with this defense, and then hopefully the offense can have the upside for some of these pockets of upside to emerge with the offensive line and the weapons. As it sits here today, really before we really know what it's going to look like with those pivotal factors for this Chiefs team, sixth ranked offense, fourth ranked defense. Can they theoretically win close games and scrap their way to a Super Bowl? Yeah, we know this Chiefs team can, but if they hit some green lights with the O-line, with the weapons especially, can this be the second best offense with the fourth best defense and really put them in a position to take control of games and feel good about winning the Super Bowl this year? I think that's where that upside really lies. But beyond the upside equation, one last really nice thing to say about this Chiefs team before we take a look at their schedule and their win total projections is this is the first team in this series, and we'll see if the remaining top four teams, it'll be the same. But as we look at our Venn diagram of strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors, as we do for all these teams, this is the first team that does not have a true listed weakness. Just a few of those wild card factors that we talked about, and then a pretty impressive list of strengths, being quarterback, offensive coaching, pass rush, defensive coaching, and I guess we also got to talk about special teams too, which it's easy for me to forget about special teams, but yes, let's talk about this side of the ball before we do look at their schedule. So they came out very strong here as well. My 8th ranked special teams. The sites that grade special teams as a team really loved the Chiefs last year. PFF had them as the 3rd overall team special teams, and then DVOA team grade for their special teams was 11th to 12th. So that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. I do think that tracks, though, having watched the Chiefs, like all these close games, they do seem to be the team that doesn't make that crippling fumble or allow a big return. And in fact, in that Texans playoff game, it flipped in reverse. Their special teams dominated the Texans special teams, blocked kicks, helping them win games as well. So even if, as we'll discuss, like the actual specialists not necessarily being elite, the way they coach this team and the culture of special teams is absolutely here. But yeah, at kicker, Harrison Butker, you feel pretty damn good about him getting back on track. But if you average out his last couple of years, he's fallen off a little bit, but still the 13th ranked kicker. So you feel pretty good about your kicker, and you feel pretty good about your returner as well. Nico Remigio, very solid in that sense, not a superstar. And then the main question is going to be your punter with Matt Ariza. For all of the kind of basically the idea that he's punt god and he's an amazing punter prospect, like just throw out all of the off-field journey that he went through. I'm not going to get into that, but it is yet another example where these elite special teams prospects, seemingly more often than not, they get to the league and turns out they aren't elite. That's just going off of PFF grade. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've evaluated every Matt Ariza punt or even would know where to begin in terms of doing that. But he did come out as the 29th graded punter per PFF last year. So we'll see if he can be a little bit better in that sense. Because we know he's got a big leg, right? But yes, finally, let's talk about this Chiefs schedule, their Vegas over-under, and what we can kind of expect for them here this year. And they draw the NFC East, which is not necessarily easy, right? You got Eagles, Commanders, and even Dallas. I might be a little bit higher in Dallas this year than some, but those games won't be easy by any stretch of the imagination. That week 2 game against Philly is going to be a spectacle for sure. And then look, week 3 at the Giants, we're still talking about Chiefs at Giants. They're going to be big favorites in that game, but it is the week after you played Philly, which is like going to take a lot out of you. And if you're going to play the Giants, I don't really want to play them in their home stadium against that pass rush when they still have hope. For those that watch the Giants deep dive, their schedule is historically brutal. Like, I want to play the Giants week 14 when they've lost all hope. Week 3 Giants might be a little bit more dangerous. The Chiefs will still be big favorites in that game, but it'll be a very interesting first 3 weeks for the Chiefs because they've got some stuff to sort through. They don't have Rashee Rice for sure, like he's suspended. You've got that new look offensive line, so you've got the Chargers game in Brazil week 1 here in a week. You got the Eagles week 2 and then the Giants, and then it actually is kind of the first 6 weeks really as I keep looking through this because you got Baltimore at home, a bounce back or at least a easier game, so to speak, at Jacksonville, not assuming they lose against Baltimore, but then Detroit week 6. So honestly, their over-under will probably be decided in the first 6 weeks of their season. They're going to play, in my opinion, a lot of close games there, at least 3 of them, I would think, against the Eagles, Ravens, and Lions. And then we know the Chiefs like to make things a little bit too close for comfort, even in games that they should be favored in as well. So if they come out of those first 6 games and the coin lands on the right side of it for the Chiefs, and they're 5-1, things lighten up for them big time down the stretch. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about a 3-3 or even a 2-4 start for the Chiefs because it's just a really tough, interesting schedule. Like anything could happen in Brazil against the Chargers week 1. And again, the fact that Rashee Rice suspension comes in the first 6 weeks when basically all their hard games are is certainly not ideal here. But there could certainly be some value to be found, like if the Chiefs are 2-4 and the networks are panicking about, is this the end of the Chiefs? There certainly could be some value to get like Chiefs to win the division, especially if they lose that Chargers game and people are leaning Chargers early. There could certainly be some value because down the stretch, like this team should be able to take care of business against basically all of their remaining opponents, really with the one tough game in there being at Buffalo, week 9, which is always a bloodbath between these two teams. So wouldn't be surprised if we get a slower start for the Chiefs and then things pick up down the stretch. But their over-under is 11.5, so if they start 2-4, they pretty much have to be perfect down the stretch if they're going to go over that. I'm not saying they are going to start 2-4. I'm just saying it's possible. Considering this is a team that does keep things pretty close to the belt, mathematically speaking, you would expect at least 1 or 2 extra losses in there with some still good opponents. You got a couple Denver games, you got Dallas, you got Houston, you got the Chargers again. It's not like it's all cakewalks down the stretch, right? It's more just those are games that they should win. Honestly, like betting this team to get to 12, 13 wins, I understand if you want to do it. I think 11 or 12 wins is probably more realistic for the Chiefs this year, and it's just an over-under that I'm staying away from. It's just pretty rare to see an over-under set that high. And then as far as like Super Bowl odds, division odds, I think the value lines up there, right? The Chiefs being 4th in Super Bowl odds, it's about where I've got them 5th in my power rankings. And then division odds, they're about even money. They're saying about 50% chance the Chiefs win this division. That's going to catch some people by surprise that they aren't like heavy favorites to win this division. But look, Denver's coming. The Chargers aren't a cakewalk. I don't think this Chiefs team is foolproof. I don't think it's crazy to think that another team could win this division. But yeah, for them to be about, odds-on favorites to win this division, that also adds up too. So probably not a lot of betting value, in my opinion, on the Chiefs. But at the same time, not a team I'm fading, right? Not going to bet against the Chiefs. Not going to bet the under on the Chiefs. Probably not going to go out and bet on Denver or the Chargers to win this division. Like, that doesn't seem smart either. You know what I'm saying? So that is where I'm at on the Kansas City Chiefs. You guys will have to let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the analysis here today. Who do you think comes next in this deep dive countdown with that number 4 spot? We're going to be having these drop like pretty much every 36 hours or so on the way up to the start of the season here. We are a week away. Looking forward to grinding the rest of these out. I appreciate you guys so much for watching, whether it was just this Chiefs deep dive or you've caught all 28 of them to this point. I appreciate you guys so much. It's been a blast. Let's get it. Let's finish this thing up. We'll see you soon. Cheers.